Hello everyone and welcome back to a best-of-3 series of professional StarCraft 2. Today it's time for a top-level game of Zerg versus Terran, where in game number 1 we find ourselves on Blackburn. Spawning here in the bottom left-hand corner of the map and playing with the red Zerg drones from Finland, we have Serral. His opponent in the bottom right, Micro Jackson himself with the blue SCVs from South Korea. We are looking at ByuN's main base. Alrighty, Serral versus ByuN. This should be a really good one. So actually, over the last couple of days, I've casted a couple of Serral series here and there, a couple of best-of-3s, but I haven't posted them to the YouTube channel, just because Serral is kind of just smashing everyone. So, in a lot of those games, right, Serral, like, exploits a weakness early on from the opponent, right? He sees a weakness and then he just kind of wins over the course of the next half hour, right? Sometimes he lets them struggle for another 5 minutes, sometimes 10 minutes, sometimes 15 minutes, but in a lot of the games, it seems like Serral's just kind of playing with his food. So I'm hoping here that ByuN is gonna give him a little bit of a harder time, because Serral is looking, once again, very strong, especially in ZVT and then also in ZVP. Anyways, yesterday I posted a poll to my YouTube community tab asking you guys who you think is the greatest StarCraft 2 player of all time. And it turns out many of you have voted for Serral. I think it's fair to say that Serral is indeed, well, in my personal opinion, he is the greatest StarCraft 2 player of all time, just because he's been looking really strong, but he's definitely amongst the very best. The second closest player, I would probably say, is Maru. Maru, of course, extremely dominant over in Korea, but struggling a little bit more outside of South Korea. He hasn't really won as many events, overseas. There's no denying, though, that Serral obviously has been extremely strong outside of South Korea, but he hasn't won, for example, a GSL Code S, just because of the fact that, well, I mean, in order to win one, that's a tournament that takes place over in South Korea over the course of like 3-4 months. He would have to pack up his entire life just to win one tournament, and I don't know. Personally, I don't think that's really necessary to prove that he is the greatest of all time, although it would be kind of fun to see him participating in a GSL. He did, of course, win the GSL versus the world twice, I want to say. I think he's won it twice. Anyways, the thing is, right, so the Korean events, the Koreans in general don't really have as many StarCraft 2 tournaments as the non-Koreans. So there's region locking going on, because once upon a time the Koreans were basically winning everything, and then Blizzard basically made steps to prevent that from happening, giving us non-Koreans also a chance to be good at the game. But these days, honestly, the skill level feels very, very close. Anyways, basically what I'm trying to get at is that, like, it's hard for the non-Koreans, or it's hard for the Koreans to participate in non-Korean events, but not nearly as hard for the non-Koreans to participate in, for example, the GSO Codes. Anyways. A Terran versus Zerg should be very fun. ByuN actually opening up with a Reaper here. So, interestingly enough, of course, he's the main reason why the Reaper got nerfed once upon a time after he won the World Championships back in, I want to say 2016. He was a little bit too good at making Reapers, and ever since then, I haven't really seen him opening up with Reapers nearly as much. But I can't blame him. Reaper openers are very good. Definitely the go-to, but many of the games I've seen him play, he's been going for, like, just a straight-up Marine and no scouting whatsoever. Serral, over the last couple of months, has been mixing it up a little bit, and would you look at that? Did he open up gasless up to this point? Yeah, he opened up gasless right now with 3 hatcheries, going for a pool first as well. Serral, once again, going for a different build order. Following it up right now with a very, very quick Roach Warren. I also quite like this Overlord position for him. Yep, he's going to be flying that in. Usually about 3:45, 4 minutes or so is when those Overlords start flying. And he's actually going to be able to see the armory coming up pretty much right as it got started. So a very unfortunate beginning right here for ByuN. Generally speaking, this means that it's going to be a Hellbat-based push. But obviously now it's scouted, and Serral was already going for Roaches. So, I mean, that's basically the worst-case scenario for a Hellbat push when you go up against Roaches, because the Hellbats just get absolutely demolished. So, great start right here for the finisher so far. But we'll see how this goes. ByuN actually with a lot of resources right now. 300 gas. Maybe he's going to go for a Raven. I really think he needs to go for a Banshee. 400 minerals? Hello. I think we need a CC, my man. Hello. Okay. He's now at, like, nearly 1,000 resources. Finally starts it up. Little bit of shakiness right here in game number 1 from ByuN. Definitely stacking up way more resources than you want here. Going for the double tech lab as a follow-up, though. So, Banshee right here coming up together with that Stimpack upgrade. Reactor here. It's got to be producing another the factory here making another reactor. There you go. I was almost going to say that the reactor was producing a reactor. That'd be something. High ground here is, of course, in favor of the Terran player. Plus, Hellions lined up can still definitely do quite a bit of damage here as well. But, you know what? This is going way better for the Terran than I was anticipating. Yeah, shoot in the end, though. Still go in favor right here of Serral, who is going to be droning behind. I think he is going to actually back off here as well soon. Because he probably knows that the Banshee is going to be... Well, yeah, maybe not. I think the Banshee was supposed to already be out. So Serral probably looked at that and he's like, oh, okay, if it's not out at this point, there's probably not going to be a Banshee in the first place. Micro Jackson is, of course, going to control his units here reasonably well at the very least. He's going to be able to go for a counterattack, but... Wow, we have a Burrow coming up already. So we're gonna go for the Spore Crawler here. How many queens does he have? He's got 5 queens as well. A couple roaches at the front. He's really not gonna take a whole lot of damage. I don't think so anyways. Third CC is done. 1-1 is starting up here as well for ByuN, it seems, although the +1 armor upgrade hasn't been queued up just yet. He needs to start it right about right now. Okay, there it is. If that would be forgotten, that would kind of suck. Anyways, queens are out. Mobile detection is soon gonna be available as well. So if the Banshee were to go into the main base, that's something that Serral can easily hold. And so far, this is looking a lot like those games that I was casting. Where Serral just looks a little bit better than everyone else. Anyways, I don't want to make this cast me fanboying too much over Serral either. But there's no denying that he definitely is one of my favorites going into IEM Katowice. Which will be taking place over in... I think in February. So February is when we will crown a new world champion in StarCraft 2. Serral, of course, mostly struggling in ZVZ these days. So he's been losing against like the top level Korean Zerg players like Dark and Rogue every once in a while. And also, for example, against Raynor. Maru and Clem can definitely also beat him. So he's definitely looking vulnerable here and there. But this is very much so what Serral has been doing over the last couple of months. Where he's playing build orders that are technically inferior. Just to, like, keep his opponent guessing, right? So going for that pool first makes this actually a pretty tricky scenario as well for ByuN. Because ByuN, of course, is very, very commonly going for that shenanigans with the barracks on the other side of the map. And it's little moves like that make it very difficult for him to justify going for those kinds of build orders. Anyways, I don't know if it's going to be holding ByuN back. ByuN definitely not scared of going for those builds, but that's just not ideal. Anyways, so... Good old Siege Tank Marine Medevac right here. Armory is coming up. It's going to be Roach, Ravager, Infestor, Queen from Serral. I don't really like that unit composition all too much, if I'm being honest with you. It's one of those unit comps that's good in the early game, it's good in the mid game, but it falls off very hard later on. But of course, if you can land a good fungal growth, that can change the tide of battle very quickly. I mean, one fungal on these Terran units can definitely, be the end of the game. So if ByuN is not expecting it, that's kind of what I mean, right? Technically speaking, this is something that ByuN can counter, but if he's not expecting it, because it is technically considered an inferior build, he can just land one fungal growth, Serral that is, and then the game is pretty much over. Anyhow, a couple of roaches over here, concussive shells are coming up, Hydra Den coming up, Hive is also constructing, so I think it is going to be a lurker transition here from Serral shortly. The drop play that ByuN is so very well known for, so far has been shut down pretty well. Creep spread is looking mighty fine as well, so... Oh, fungal. Okay, at least he now sees the Infestor, so that's something. Infestor didn't have energy just yet, and ByuN has spotted it, so that's important. That way he shouldn't be balling up his units like this. But apparently this man laughs in the face of danger. Great scan there, actually. Grabbing 6 Reap Tumors, if I'm not mistaken. Alright. +2/+2 coming up for the Terran. 2/2 coming up as well for Serral. For the Zerg. Going into the Lurker Den here. Hive is already done. Yeah, he's going to be going from Roaches and Ravagers into Lurkers straight up. Now, that doesn't mean he won't really be having any Lings and Banes. So, without Lings and Banes, it's going to be quite difficult to stop Ghosts. So, I wouldn't mind seeing ByuN transition towards Ghosts pretty quickly here as well. He's actually making a wall over here. A little bit worried of those Roach run-bys, I suppose. Base in the top left in a little bit of trouble, but Roaches for now will deal with it just fine. Roaches mostly start falling off when Terran hits them with the 3-3. There's that fungal. Corrosive Balls over here are going to shut down that structure that was producing there as well. And now the Lurkers are coming up. I really think we need to see a Ghost transition here. So, generally speaking, ghosts are counted by Zerglings and Banelings, which is kind of funny. Banelings in particular are their, the bane of their existence. Haha, so funny. Anyways, this is not an army that can really transition towards Ling Bane very effectively at all. So Adrenal Glands is coming up. Nidus Network is coming up as well for Serral. So maybe he's thinking about... we've seen a lot of Niduses in the main base. I wouldn't be surprised if that's what Serral wants to go for here. Sensor Tower here as well. He's going to be able to spot a couple of those incoming units once it's done. But Lurkers in the right place can make it extremely difficult for ByuN to break out of his base. Like, say, for example, Lurkers are right over here. That would be bad. It's going to be very hard to break that. Couple of Biles here, too. So far, this game has been all Serral. But that doesn't mean it's gonna stay that way. Oh my god. You're not supposed to be an anti-air unit, Ravager, man. I'm just saying. Anyways. Here's the speedy boy in the main base. Popping the Nidus Worm right next to the siege tank, so the siege tank can't actually fire. Samwise right there smiling at the... I don't think it's gonna go up, though. No, he's smiling right there at the worm. Either way. Let's continue the harassment over here. Siege tank will be biled down. Good defense here, though, by ByuN so far. As this game proceeds and as the armies get bigger, I do think that this is going to become better and better for ByuN, especially with the 3-3 upgrades. But, yeah, okay, so finally we have the cloaking field coming up. I was going to say, he really does need to make that transition. If he decides to stick around on Marine Marauder Medevac, like, siege tank, it's not going to go so well. Ghosts are going to be, yeah, I think really good. Ghosts to snipe down basically everything. You can use it on Ravagers, you can use it on Infestors, you can use it right here on the Lurkers, and again, Serral doesn't really have that much good against the... against that type of army at this point. Oh my god, those spines are dealing so much damage. You do obviously need a decent eco to be able to even afford going for one of those... Oh my god, alright. To go for one of those ghost transitions. Whenever I say the word ghost transition, I always think of that Sabaton song called Ghost Division. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? Ghost Division. Or Ghost Transition. Sometimes I remind myself of silly things when I'm casting games. I can hear my mind getting distracted while I'm casting games. Once again, a good fungal. Yeah, so the Lost Roaches at this point are being replaced with Hydralisks. +1 melee is coming up as well for Serral, so I do think he probably wants to transition towards those. Oh, okay. He probably does want to transition towards those Lings and Banes at some point, anticipating that transition. Yeah, he's being very, very generous right now with his Roach gifts. But I think that's by design. So 21 SCVs end up going down. Gold base here in a lot of trouble. I don't think you want to queue up those or like group up those units. My god, this one Lurker killed so much stuff. So pretty much a flawless game up to this point here for Serral, though. Look at his bank as well. I've casted so many games over the last couple of months where ByuN is just looking so dominant. Not here, at least. Not so far, anyways. Lurker, once again, going in the back. Using that very nice range here, forcing a scan, putting the Ghost in a tricky position. One of the Ghosts here will be, well, just walked to its death. A couple of command centers over here are going to be forced to cancel their orbital command move. Because, this has been so one-sided. Fungal? I mean, it's not game over yet, don't get me wrong. I think there could be a tempo lead for the Terran player. My god, even Ghosts are being abducted here. Brenda just moving into the third base of the Terran. There could be like a big tempo push if Serral gives away his army on accident, because his army's really not that big. It's just that he can remake it by the time that the Terran marches across the map. Top right in base is being acquired, but there's a pesky Zergling blocking the CC from landing. The same can be said right here for the Zergling over here. And even though it's difficult for Serral at this point to engage, he's just trying to be as obnoxious as possible. At some point, this Terran player will run out of money in the bases that he's got. So even though these trades aren't particularly efficient here for ByuN, or for Serral at all, ByuN doesn't have much money. Like, look at his bank. He's got 100 minerals right now and 173 supply. Alright. He needs new base. So securing this one in the top right would be nice. It's just that if ByuN puts too many units over here, Serral's gonna march towards the natural. I do love the siege tank spread here, though, from ByuN. Siege tanks here have been getting a lot of kills. But at this point, the Vipers have arrived. EMP right there was missed initially. At the very least, the follow-up here is decent. So, well, this is actually a phenomenal trade right here for ByuN. Getting very, very, very efficient trades right here for the units that he's lost. Creep spread, though, this far forward. Infestor also very far forward. And we'll be able to get out of the range right there of the scan. Alright, if you look right now at the resources lost, yeah, you can see that it is heavily in favor right here of the Terran player. It's something. It's just that Serral has been mining a whole lot more money here for the majority of the game as well. Alright, here's that transition. So the Ghosts right now are the main threat to that Zerg army. 44 Banelings should definitely make that a little bit more straightforward. That being said, ByuN does still have the tools, to be honest. Like, he does still have siege tanks here. He does still have a healthy amount of Marines, Marauders, and Medevacs, too. He definitely can deal with this army. Every time, by the way, we see a scan going down like that, it is something that could have been a mule. Like, it's the same amount of energy to drop a mule for the Terran as it is for him to go for a scan. Base at the 12 o'clock position. Might be in a little bit of trouble, but at the same time, this is that moment where the Banelings are starting to hunt right here for the Ghost. Fungal growth are going to prevent these units from escaping as effectively. Manual detonations right now by Serral as well. He clears out the Ghost count. Only 2 of them remain at this point. There is a big army up north, and that's something. But I'm still looking at that Serral bank. He's even got a greater Spire finishing up here. There's nothing that the Terran player can really do against Brute Lords at this point in the game. Third base of the Terran is gone. Hydras are going to be able to take care of a couple of these leftover units as well. I think the reinforcements of the Zerg should be able to get rid of these siege tanks and a couple of leftover units from the Terran. And I think that this is pretty much all she wrote right here. He can obviously stay in the game for a little while longer if he really wants to, but Serral is still mining. Even his medevac, not going to be able to make it out. Alright. At this point, we're at 195 supply, with like 6,000 resources in the bank for Serral, versus 134 supply for ByuN, with like 500 minerals and gas in the bank. He decides to start up a couple more CCs, so that's something. But I don't think Serral is going to really allow him to finish those. I think he's once again ready to go for a big attack. Abduction right there in the wrong direction, but the Lurkers don't really care. At this point, since the Ghost army has disappeared from earlier, the Lurkers should be able to reign supreme. Even blinding clouds are coming up on a couple of leftover units. Serral is going to be sending 50 more Zerglings in this direction very soon. And there it is. GG is called. The game number 1 goes in favor of the Finn. Alrighty. So, where did that even go wrong for ByuN? Game number 2, by the way, is on Hardwire. I guess it didn't really start off that great for him, right? So he went for that Hellbat push, but the Hellbat push essentially got countered. Just by Serral going for a gasless opener with a pull first into, like, very quick roaches, and then it got scouted pretty much right away. And from there on out, Serral just kept building on that very small advantage. So that's kind of what I was trying to explain at the beginning of the cast. He got an advantage at like the 4-minute mark, and then it just kind of built on that. Oh my god, are we actually gonna go? Really? Oh, it might be a hatch first. Yeah, it is gonna be a hatch first. Okay. Wow. ByuN apparently decides to go for some proxy barracks on Hardwire, despite the fact that his opponent did go for a pull first in the previous game with a bunch of blind Zerglings. I mean, that can backfire extremely hard. But apparently ByuN right here playing some mental gymnastics. He's like, well, Serral probably goes for a pull first maybe 25% of the time. If he did it in game number 1, there's an unlikely chance he's going to be able to do it again. So I'll be planting a couple of barracks on the other side of the map. It's going to be 3 barracks right here in the middle of Hardwire. Overlord is going to spot this pretty soon. Maybe, maybe not. It's actually pretty far back. Alright, no gases here. So ByuN is going to be following this up with a ton of Marines. This could backfire actually really badly for Serral. So he's gonna go hatch gas pool, it seems. That pool is pretty late compared to the last game at the very least. If he loses the Overlord, that's pretty much GG. Overlords are close to those like high grounds, so at the very least they can hide. But at this point, the first Marines are already coming up. And I wouldn't be surprised if we're gonna be seeing a few bunkers as well in that choke point of the Zerg. Maybe even a little bit closer to the hatch. Alright, Serral's gonna see it right now. Panic mode. Are we gonna panic? No, we're not gonna panic. The problem is he doesn't know if it's 2 or 3 barracks. So I really do like this move right here from ByuN. Now, Serral has to make a bit of a gamble. Is it a double Rex proxy or is it a triple Rex proxy? You need to respond differently to the both of them. So he's pulling drones right now, hoping that it's one of the 2 options, trying to see if he can surround a few of those Marines with his workers. So far, that's kind of working out, I guess. SCV over here will be killed, so at least that's something. Spinecrawler is coming up, but at this point, ByuN is going to be able to pump out a lot of units. He's once again forced to pull the drones at this point because if that bunker finishes, he's going to be in a lot of trouble. Instead, though, he decides to bypass that entirely and go for the Marines themselves. But I think that this is a coin flip that did go in favor right here of ByuN ever so slightly. I mean, he hasn't killed anything critical just yet. It's just that I still see a lot of Marines out. And there's no Zerking speed or anything like that coming up, right? So Serral did pull out of gas. Spinecrawler is done. So maybe that one can kind of zone, but if it repositions, it's, yeah, gonna be gunned at by those Marines. Assuming ByuN controls this well, this should be an advantage for him. Serral probably will go for one big push here, pulling the drones once again, uprooting the Spinecrawler too, sending as many units as possible. But if he loses the hatchery here, if he loses the natural expo, that is pretty much game over. A little bit of a supply block right now here for Serral too. Yeah, he didn't want to pull the drones there, but he couldn't know. GG is cold. There it is. Alright, well that's one way of winning. Alrighty, so that brings us to our final game of the day, and it is gonna be on 2,000 atmospheres. Little bit of a cheap win right there for ByuN, but obviously it counts, right? If that wouldn't have worked, it would be whatever. 2-0 against Serral. It is what it is, right? That game number 1 was kind of tricky. It's gonna be hard to win against them in a longer game, but maybe, right? If you can proxy Rex rush him, maybe you can shake up Serral just a little bit, and then all of a sudden playing a more regular game once again is gonna be a little bit more useful. So, our final game for today is gonna be 2,000 atmospheres. I actually kind of want to see if Serral goes for a pull first again here, or if he just... No, he will still go for the hatchery. Not really too shaken up there. Although the first Overlord is gonna go in a bit of a different pattern than what we normally see. Second Overlord also making very sure that there's no tricky barracks shenanigans, at least close to the Zerg's main base. Obviously, ByuN could be planting the barracks right over here. He could be planting the barracks right... There's a load of locations where he could position them. Well, it's not gonna happen. I do like this actually from ByuN, going for a pretty laid-back barracks. If this would be a quick Overlord scout, maybe the Overlord would overextend a little bit, and then the Marine can actually kill it. Either way, it doesn't really matter all too much. It is probably gonna float on over in that choke point, though, a little while later as well, just to make sure that the wall-off is completed. Ooh, we're gonna go straight into a reactor. Okay. This is what I mean sometimes, man. Look at what ByuN is doing here, right? So in game number 1, Serral went for blind Zerglings with a pull first. ByuN scouted in that game with an SCV as well as with a Reaper. Game number 2, he knows that his opponent went for that build in game number 1, so he decides to proxy barracks on the other side of the map. Very risky. Now ByuN decides to even step it up another notch, and he goes for a reactor first, no wall off here initially, and then, you know, a command center on the low ground. ByuN is like, you know what, I need to cut a couple corners. If I cut a couple corners, maybe things are going to be a little bit easier for me. Second barracks is coming up as well. I've seen this build a couple times before from ByuN. You'll be able to pump out so many of those Marines early on. Is it going to be the triple Rex? Oh, yeah, it is going to be the triple Rex. Okay, that's cool. So I actually wanted to talk about this build. This is a relatively new development in the Terran versus Zerg matchup over the course of like the last, I would say, 2 months or so. So Cure has been doing this build quite a bit, and obviously Cure won the GSO code S. I've seen Maru do it, I've seen ByuN do it, I've seen a couple of the top-level Terran players do it. Now, what's kind of funny is I think it was at Stay at Home Story Cup, Raynor mentioned that he thinks that this build is awful. He thinks that this build is very bad. And then we had Solar on the call. I think it was Solar. And Solar was like, no, the build is very, very good. So apparently the Zerg players are not entirely decided on whether or not this build order is actually good. The problem is, right, theoretically speaking, this is usually a build that's played against Protals. So usually you follow this up with a Factory and then eventually a Starport as well. So it's like 2 Tech Labs, you go for the Stimpak, Combat Shield over there, you finish all those upgrades up all together. Technically speaking, Zerg players shouldn't have a very hard time against it, but it seems that like the 2 standard builds that Zerg players play most of the time with either the double upgrades first, or for example the quick lair with the bailing speed first, those build orders have a pretty hard time against this sort of strategy, and obviously it's gonna be quite tricky for the Zerg to actually scout this sort of thing out. Anyways, it's kind of cool. Curious to see how Serral decides to go up against this. He once again does have an Overlord right here in the back. Ay. That rally point was basically flawless. I think he is going to be able to see everything. I mean, at this point, he does see 3 Marines. I think he's already seen a couple more Marines out on the minimap too. Okay, he doesn't actually see too much, but he sees a dozen Marines. Okay, less than a dozen Marines. A half dozen Marines. Out on the map, and he's seen a bunch in the main base. I think he'll probably put 1 and 1 together and realize exactly what's going on. This is extremely risky from ByuN, by the way. There's no Stimpak yet. There's no Combat Shield. There's no Medevac. This could just die to like 20 Zerglings. And then at that point, ByuN is going to be in a world of disaster. Luckily for him, though, Serral doesn't really make that group of roaming Zerglings, but this is a little bit too ballsy for my liking. Serral doing the Zerg thing, though, but maybe he can pick up a couple of the reinforcing Marines. Yeah. Nicely done right here. Although, good work as well by ByuN. I like what ByuN is doing, though. ByuN's sitting at the roulette table right now. Except it's a game of StarCraft. He's like, yeah, let me put all my money on red. He's not gonna scout red. I promise you, he's not doing it. It's like, alright, ByuN. If you say so, my man. Anyways, Stimpak Combat Shield done at this point. Still no Medevacs, by the way. This is a different variant of that build entirely. I think the Factory was actually very late, wasn't it? Anyways, +1 infantry weapons is coming up. Serral did make a huge amount of Zerglings. Honestly, Zerglings aren't really going to do very well against this army at all. Yeah, I don't think ByuN even wants to fight. I don't think ByuN is going to engage. Banelings are coming around the back as well. These are slow Banes. ByuN, of course, with Stimpak and good micro, should be able to pick those off. Every single time he stims, though, this is going to be very painful. Nice targeting right here by the Terran player initially, but there wasn't enough. And this is what I mean. How is this a good build order? I don't understand it either, man. So, okay, let me put this... let me put it straight. 3rd CC normally starts at the absolute latest at like 420 for Terran. Maybe 430 if they did a poor execution. Right now, we're 6 minutes into the game. Pretty much. And the 3rd CC has just started up. The only thing that ByuN really has going for him at this point is that his build is kind of strange. And Serral is going to have to respond to it on the fly. So I can imagine Serral doesn't have as much practice against this sort of scenario, or in this sort of scenario, you know, than the Terran player, but it really feels like against high-level Zerg players, you just kind of give them an advantage, right? Because you're not going to win with you're not going to win, right? With the Stimpak Marine push with 3 racks. I don't think so. Unless the Zerg is playing exceptionally greedy. 1-1 is starting up. I'm expecting bailing speed pretty quick here as well for Serral with his next little bit of gas. Serral not actually had that many workers either, though, but it's already got the 4th hatch coming up. Probably going to be able to transition pretty easily. Queens right now start firing at the Medevac too. Good targeting, though, this time around here by ByuN, keeping those units alive. Okay, transfuse energy is now also being used. As long as the Medevacs live, this army is actually very, very potent. Okay, I like this a lot better from ByuN. Nicely done. I say that, and the Medevac full of units dies, as well as the couple of units on the ground. So, yeah. All around me a familiar face. It's just one Medevac going back home. It's gonna have to relay the story of what happened. Anyways, 3rd CC finally morphing. Oh man, I really am not a fan of this build. I just don't see... Like, we see this build regularly right now. I just never really see it do particularly well, and I can only imagine once this build is, like, practiced against a little bit more, Serral already seems very comfortable, it's just gonna get worse, right? Anyways. All the top-level Terran players are playing it, so, you know, I might disagree, but there's probably a good reason why they're playing it, right? Anyways, bailing speed is very late, so maybe that's something that ByuN can abuse, but he's pumping out 8 Marines at once right now, which is actually quite formidable, right? That is a lot of Marines at this stage in the game. Main base is starting to run dangerously low on resources, though. Armory and second NG bay is coming up as well. There is, of course, this beautiful siege tank spot over here. I actually don't really like the 4th base position here for Serral. I think the one on the... Oh, okay, well... Serral doesn't either. The one on the left made a little bit more sense. Especially with the way the creep spread is going right now. Because, you know, fighting this off creep, especially without bailing speed, pretty much impossible. Defending this base up here is going to be much easier. Anyhow, Liberators is a follow-up. Okay. +2/+2 is going to start up soon for ByuN. A couple of Banelings are going to just try and walk into... Okay, that's way too ambitious. That should never work. But maybe ByuN wasn't paying attention there. Bailing speed actually done right there, so a bit of a disconnect from the Serral player... Or from the Serral player, from the Zerg player. A couple of Zerglings, though, are just dealing some damage together with the siege tank over here on the high ground. Bio drop on the left side of the map. Okay, maybe... Okay, if ByuN can pick up the pace, that would be fantastic. If he can actually pick up the pace, get a couple kills here, get that tempo lead that he's so very well known for and so comfortable with, that would be amazing. So far, though, it looks like Serral is holding on, but only by a thread. To be fair, though, that's most of what he needs. No damage being done this time around with that Baneling roll-by. Base on the left is still alive. 4th base over here also alive. That siege tank is gone from this little choke. So at the very least, these bio units aren't getting as much damage done as they would. Here's the reinforcements, though. A couple of Liberators also have shown up. Ooh, we never started up +2 armor. He really needs +2 armor. Mistakes like that should not be happening. No 4th CC, by the way. So there's basically... Yeah, only 3 command centers out, and he's gonna go for a ton of units out of those CCs. Serral's sitting, because of that, only at 70 workers here, which I quite like. That being said, this choke point, yeah, I think it's time to just give up this base. I wouldn't mind it at all if Serral just decides to relocate and go for the third, or like the base on the left side of the map. I think it makes sense. Hive is coming up. Okay, I think he might be evacuating on out of there. Yep. I think this is a good idea. So +2/+2, just about to finish here for the Zerg. Terran still has not started up +2 armor. Might be on purpose, but I think it isn't. Pretty sure he just forgot. Since this is a 3-base play right here from ByuN. Oh my god. Oh god, I think the Zerglings are trying to set themselves up for a big surround. Not any vision at the watchtower. I would love to see one of those Zerglings running over there. Anyways, since there is no 4th CC, Serral doesn't really need 90 drones or anything along those lines either. So I think Serral's playing this very well. He's actually setting a huge trap up. He could go for a big surround if he really wants to anyway. Instead, he decides to go for a counterattack towards the top left-hand corner. I thought he was going to collapse on top of his army. Beautiful movement here once again by ByuN, though. But this is an army not supported by medevacs. So eventually, it's going to go down. 2-2 not done yet for the Terran player. Finally, he realized it, by the way, starting up the +2 armor. A couple of Vipers are happening. Okay. So Vipers are going to be able to abduct the Liberators and abduct the siege tanks or use Blinding Cloud on them. And at that point, it's mostly just going to be Marines remaining. So Vipers here make a ton of sense. There's already Hydras out, so Hydraling Bane Viper. Strong unit comp. Adrenal Glands is coming up. A couple of Banelings are morphing in to go for that mineral line as well. And honestly, right now this is becoming rather desperate right here for Terran. Main base is run out. Obviously, he can reposition the main and the natural to other locations if he wants to. But there's already Zerglings scouting these locations. Well, the one that was scouting that just got picked off. Serral's at Hive Tech. ByuN is still in the mid game. I'm really not liking this all too much. Yes, he's got a large army. But this is not an army. Like, I would love to see a Lurker Den going on. This is not really an army that can deal with Lurkers very effectively. Although I think Serral probably wants to clean up these big heavy hitters first. Once those Liberators are gone, they're not going to be very easily replaced at all. Big Zergling counterattack, actually, while that Terran army is parking on the creep. 4cc gets killed, so that's no cancel. 400 minerals down the drain. Siege tank over there dealing more friendly fire. 6 o'clock base being reacquired, as well as the one south of that. Okay, here we go. Parasitic bomb on the medevac. Good split right there by ByuN. Zerglings, once again, running across. They could go for a surround. They could go for a big fight over here. Now they're just going to try and pick up some reinforcements, I suppose. Fair enough. At some point, Serral is going to pull the trigger and fight this army. He's trying to bait it as deep onto the creep as possible. Is this the moment he was waiting for? Queens are available as well, by the way. There's 12 of those in total. Not bad whatsoever. Okay, Liberator gets abducted. Parasitic bomb right there on the medevac. Not a good split this time around. ByuN takes a lot of damage. Alright, Serral actually once again decides to give up the base, and he's also gonna, I guess, give up the base in the top section of the map. He knows very well that the situation is desperate at this point for ByuN. ByuN is on 3 bases. He knows that these bases are gonna run out very soon. He knows the right side hasn't been taken yet either, because he's kept checking over there. 12 o'clock also not acquired. At this point, he knows that Terran is on his last legs, and he needs to fight him. So rather than fighting off creep, Serral's just repositioning the drones that he's got, and he's telling him, come get me. If you want to fight, you're gonna do it on my terrain. Either that or I will keep running around the map, dealing damage wherever I can. Like, for example, another 15 SCVs end up going down here. I'm not gonna allow you to fight where you want to fight. I think that's where probably most of the Zerg players get impatient, right? They want to fight this sort of army. They want to get it out of that position. At this point, Serral has a huge bank, so he decides it's time to engage. Blinding clouds are disabling the siege tanks. Liberators are being abducted here by the Vipers as well. Vipers, absolute MVPs in that battle. All of the Terran units get destroyed. And Serral, my god. He's looking incredibly strong.